Supergirl has been a show that I've had a mostly, it's okay, dislike kind of relationship with. I never intended to start out this way because I love superhero TV shows and movies. In my formative years, I would watch anything, and I mean anything that was even loosely connected to Spider-Man, as if I was the Pope and it was me reading the Bible. That is, if I was any Pope besides the current one who's trying to actively change their religion. And that extended to shows like Justice League, Teen Titans, and the Batman Forever VHS I assuredly destroyed with how many times I rewound it. So my go-to when I approach a TV show that's about superheroes is to be excited because I always think in the back of my head that I'm going to be hit with a sense of joy and wonder that accompanies the nostalgia of me watching those TV shows as a kid, but now with a seasonal arc that I can enjoy as an adult. Even when I'm watching a TV show that was meant more for adults like Daredevil or The Punisher, this carries over because I think it's tricking the part of my brain that still thinks as a kid and bringing it into adulthood a little bit more by giving me characters that I loved watching when I was young and bringing me into a new stage of life where things are dark and disgusting. I might not know much about how taxes work or the justice system or anything like a good adult should, but I at least know not to make Vincent D'Onofrio mad. Now, I've made it known that Arrow has gone from a show that was pretty good in its start and got really good up until about season 3, but since then has mostly just gone downhill. And the only things that are really good about it are a few good performances and some character moments. Meanwhile, the rest of the show has just become kind of painstaking to watch. But right now, the two best shows are probably The Flash and Legends of Tomorrow. The Flash, because even in the worst season it has, it's still better than anything Supergirl has ever done. And Legends, because it clearly understands what it is and is fine with that, and has settled to try and be the nerdiest possible show that it can be on television. But Supergirl makes me want to enact body horror on myself to the point where I don't even know why I'm watching this show anymore. I won't even go into how much I would rather watch a modern day Superman show just because he's a quintessential character in American media and culture, and the person they have to play him in Supergirl is perfect, not just as Superman, but as Clark Kent as well. Even from the pilot episode, Supergirl has had a lot of these issues before, but they've never been as bad as they are now, which is very unfortunate because there's a lot of things in this show that people like me can love. For instance, one of my favorite characters from the Justice League cartoon show was Martian Manhunter, because he has such an interesting backstory. And while in the cartoon he constantly gets BTFO'd by anything that even has a pulse, he's still a very interesting character and integral to the team. So when they brought him into his first live-action interpretation on this TV show, I was pumped. That's probably one of the main strengths that I can think of that Supergirl has over some of these other shows, and that it's able to bring in a character like Martian Manhunter and kind of integrate it into the setting, and it works. But the pros of the show do not outweigh the cons. Now, I want to preface my first problem with a request. Think of any show that has been on within the last 20 to 30 years that people are still watching to this day, and people will continue to watch to this day. These kinds of shows are going to be like The Office, Firefly, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Friends. These are shows that have staying power because something about them is ultimately timeless. People are going to be watching all incarnations of the Star Trek shows even after Space Fleet is a thing, and they're going to become some kind of training simulation. You mark my word. But even when a show isn't ultimately timeless, either because it references things happening at the time or something else like that, it doesn't necessarily have to hurt the overall product. RoboCop is a very good example of this because it showcases a future in which we have drones and cyborgs around the same time that we have the first Rage Against the Machine single. But the fact that the story is still about a man trying to figure out who he is after a tragedy and it's covered in more blood than a Civil War surgeon is the reason that it's still a movie that people view as a classic today. What Supergirl has done is essentially take a plot line that is very easy to manipulate. That is, an average person that is granted powers or has always had powers or some kind of ability decides to rise up and have a higher calling, and made it too dated and too specific to the time period that it's being released in. Like, let's talk about another example, Supernatural. Supernatural for sure makes references to things that are happening within the time frame the show is aired, but it knows to only make a reference to it once or twice and to a thing that everyone is going to remember that also won't distract from the plot. Example, a reference to Frozen, of all things, from Dean. And in season 13, in which alternate universe Bobby, don't ask, there's a lot going into that, calling Donald Trump the reality show host for president. 20 years from now, when all the people who were born in 2010 are adults and they decide, hey, I want to watch Supernatural, the first thing they're going to see is not Sam and Dean talking about the Bush or Obama administration. It's going to be, hey, movie reference, killing demons.
So what, I'm Thelma and you're Louise and we're just gonna hold hands and sail off this cliff together?
Meanwhile, Supergirl has made it its personal mission to include references to things that the people 20 years from now won't necessarily have first-hand knowledge of and will have to ask their parents. Because in 2018, the people watching this who were born in, say, 2015 were 3 years old. All throughout it, especially since Trump has become president, there's been a lot of references to things going on in our reality. There's no problem of making a work of fiction that references what's happening in reality, but at the same time, there's a certain way of doing it. At the bereft of using an example that's been done to death, the reason 1984 is such a classic book is because it's a message that transcends time, and we have real-world examples of it happening in the past and now in our own society. And it's not exactly a controversial statement to say, I am not a fan of the Nazi Party, nor am I a fan of the North Korean government. And 1984 is basically saying, these things are bad, okay? So when you read it, it doesn't feel like it's necessarily being preachy so much as it's being informative and showing you a view of the world that is very inhospitable to human thought, and showing you what it could be like. Supergirl has a nasty habit of bringing up things that are only going to be known by the parents of the show because they witnessed it firsthand. There may be talk of it and it might come back as some kind of slogan years from now, but for the most part, the kids who watch this show, because as we've seen demonstrated presently, there are kids who watch these shows, are just gonna look at it and be like, Mom, what's happening? Let's talk about a moment in season 2. In season 2 of Supergirl, President Linda Carter, because of course it would be Wonder Woman that's president, signs into action the Alien Amnesty Act. What this does on Supergirl's Earth is basically giving all alien refugees and immigrants total citizenship in the United States of America. Sounds like a kind of stupid idea considering there doesn't seem to be any vetting process that we see, but at the end of the day, whatever, it's fiction. I'm not going to judge it too hard because it's not my world. Well, when going to a bar that many aliens in National City actually frequent, and when one of the patrons is reminded that they were just given permission by the president to basically live on American soil for free, he says a very common phrase after the election, "Not my president." Besides the fact that this show is definitely not a fan of the current administration of the White House, why would an alien say this in this show? I mean, these aliens should be very pro-POTUS Carter. Did you not watch Wonder Woman? I mean, this doesn't make any sense because, like I said, President just gave this dude complete permission to couch surf, even though he's not a human. And for some reason, his first response is something that should be directed at Trump, but he's not the president in this reality. So this isn't a shot at the in-universe show. This is the shot at our reality, and a way of signaling to the audience that Trump is bad. Okay. Wow, thanks TV show. I really wanted to be reminded of the current dumpster fire that is US politics in a show where people fly and shoot concentrated heat out of their face. I was totally down with that. Especially when it makes no sense in the context of the setting or the characters. That's real good job, CW. Real great. Let us now discuss in the finale of season 2, in which Supergirl and Cat Grant both find out that dun dun dun! President Carter actually is an alien. Upon this realization, Cat Grant asks if they are still a Democrat. First of all, oh, sweet catharsis, that felt good. And second of all, why would this be Cat Grant's first question ever at this realization? I don't care if you were biologically and physiologically not human, but if you're gonna run for president, you kinda have to be born here. There's rules. Am I the only one who cares about the rules?
Is the whole world gone crazy?
Now let's talk about an episode in season 3 that was the catalyst for all this, because this is what sent me into my fury. In season 2 of Supergirl, Supergirl's sister figures out that she's gay and then she gets a girlfriend. Okay, cool. Not necessarily what I signed up for with the show, but I also didn't sign up for Romeo and Juliet between a Kryptonian and a Daxamite. I don't care about a romance. Fine, that's cool, I guess. And of course, because the show has to remind us doing this kind of thing is bad, we find out that the girlfriend's dad basically disowned her once she came out of the closet. There is one episode where the dad actually comes to National City to try and make up with his daughter and be a part of her life. And he finds that years after the fact, he still cannot reconcile. He goes on this long-winded rant about how he was 9 years old when he came to America from Mexico, and how other kids, when he was working in a factory, which I don't buy. He's probably working in a factory in the 70s. I'm pretty sure OSHA existed then, unless he's doing odd jobs or something. But these kids are calling him all kinds of slurs, saying these nasty things about him. And he goes on to say that despite all this, he actually was able to get voted in as sheriff because he worked his butt off. People cared about him. They liked him, especially the ones that made fun of him early in his life. All right, cool. You did it. That's awesome. Congratulations. Well, then he starts in on his daughter as if she's the bad guy for being gay, even though she clearly didn't have a choice in that matter. But then he brings up something that really made me mad, because he says how people look at him and his daughter as rapists and murderers because they're Mexican. And just, first of all, great job at taking the president's quotes out of context when he was talking about MS-13 and other horrible people that are illegally immigrating here and coming across the border and stuff. Awesome job. But this quote is a problem on two fronts, because again, Trump is not president in Supergirl's reality. It's still Linda Carter. But even if this was a quote that was actually in universe in Supergirl and not just the show stroking its hate boner over President Trump, wouldn't the people on Earth, and especially in National City where alien attacks are pretty much rampant, be more concerned with aliens walking amongst humans than anything involving ethnicity and race of our own species? I'm gonna kind of butcher a Terry Pratchett quote, but it goes something like, black and white stopped fighting each other once they realized they all had the gang up on green. I don't care about whatever prejudices there are in real life over one's race or country of origin. Once aliens start coming down, there is no other tribe you should be a part of than the one descended from Homo sapien freaking sapien. And to make him the ultimate hypocrite, he says they would hate her more for being gay than being a Mexican, even though no one hates that. No one hates that in this day and age, and if they do, they're a very small minority. But then he just leaves her again, so thanks for that show, just proving it to us that yes, he is indeed a scumbag. Now, you could say, well, yeah, Dan, that's the whole point, is to show that that kind of thing is bad. We know it's bad. We went through the 90s and early 2000s where we had it beat over our heads that you can't disown your kids or family because they're gay. No one, and I mean no one who's going to do that is going to be convinced otherwise by this show. You just need to stop. That's something that you have to do on like a personal level, face to face. Supergirl is not going to change their mind. Now, moving away from the social and political stuff, I want to get to my final point, and that is that this show has a problem getting to the meat of it. That is, getting to its conflict. Season 2 took quite a bit of time, and I want to say about 2/3 of the season, to finally get to its main conflict between Kara and Mon-El's mother. And season 3 is just now starting to get to the part where we actually have a villain that's defined. And I can't really remember what happened in season 1 of Supergirl. I should probably go back and rewatch that. Oh, wait. But like I said, most of season 2 took so long to get to that point that if you're still watching it, you must be a masochist like me who enjoys this kind of punishment. At least Arrow gives us a blurb as to what's going on within the second episode of the season, and The Flash makes it clear that there is in fact a villain that it needs to be focused on, even if it turns out there's a different villain later on. And Legends of Tomorrow has less episodes than any of these shows out there, so it needs to get down to the nitty-gritty, otherwise it's just going to be wasting time. But Supergirl just can't help but impede itself. I don't care how much stuff is actually happening surrounding this Rain character in this season. I could not care less because the show has made me care less. Or whatever the proper way of saying that term is. So, because of all this, I've decided that I'm no longer going to watch Supergirl. At first I felt obligated because I was watching all these DC shows together, so I felt like I needed to. But the exemption of the odd crossover episode where I might need to know what the hell's going on, I'm not watching any more of them. I am done. I hung with it there in the first season and even in the second, but season 3 just clenched the butthole of why I don't want to watch this show anymore. And this video is going to supersede a video I did about a year ago in which I say Supergirl's first season was actually not too bad. If I had known then what I know now, I would have said avoid it like the plague. And I will tell you now, if you're like me and you're watching this, stop watching it. Don't give them your viewership. Don't give them your attention. It's not a good show. There's no need to watch it anymore. It's terrible. Done. Let's end it. But with all that said, I'm Daniel Movie Man. I'm going to try and find a good show and have a good day.